One of the worst years in Hollywood history is finally coming to a close, and not with a bang, but rather with a whimper. I don't recall the last time that it has been so soft at the box office heading into Christmas like it is this time around. Last year, at least we had a couple of notable hilarities going on. You had the Marvels bombing in real time, and then you had an entire slate of films coming in a week, 2 weeks ahead of Christmas, and then hell, even on the day you had some heavy hitters coming out, like Wonka being a surprise hit and Aquaman 2 outperforming anybody's expectations, and outside of, I think, Black Adam being the best performing DC film that's out there. That's kind of crazy, but on the flip side of that beleaguered superhero coin, you got Marvel. More specifically, you've got Sony Marvel, because Kraven the Hunter bombs with $11 million opening weekend, and brother, of the high profile releases that we were tracking heading into this past weekend, that wasn't even the worst performer, but we'll get to that one all in due time. But there's quite a bit of news to this story right here. It's the worst start for a Sony produced Marvel film, which is, yeah, it's probably justified in receiving such a low opening weekend, because I heard a couple of different reviews from this, and everybody's saying this is far and away the worst, like the absolute most abysmal Sony Marvel film to date. Like, at least you could get some enjoyment, okay? I've heard mixed things. It's like, is it better or worse than Madam Web? Well, it's a hell of a lot less enjoyable than Madam Web, because you could ironically watch that film and get some chuckles out of it. Craven's just bad, and that's why it's going to be making that slurpy sound as it just circles the drain on the way down, because you got Sonic 3 coming out this weekend, and it's probably going to take away anybody who was just looking for a big, dumb, fun action film that's relatively family friendly, and just go ahead and transpose all of those eyeballs over there to that, because holy shit, man. It's kind of crazy, because I'm looking at I'm looking at the releases heading to the box office this weekend, and yeah, it's Sonic 3, Mufasa, which that one's going to be interesting. We'll have to talk about that after Christmas, how well that one performs, or hell, we might even be able to fit that in right before Christmas, because that one drops on the 20th, and that, oh boy, that opening weekend is tracking like a mother, and especially with what's still at the top of the list, I don't think it's going to do very well. And that right there, like I said before when we were talking about the Snow White stuff, it's going to be an awful good bellwether to see what's ultimately coming in March, but more on that when we have to deal with that. But yeah, outside of Mufasa and Sonic 3, like there's nothing at the theaters, bro, and everything else that's there that's still bringing in money, it's getting long in the tooth. Sony's Kraven the Hunter, a superhero spin-off starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Spider-Man's a notorious foe, launched behind already low expectations at number 3 with $11 million in 3,200 theaters. That's really crazy. It landed the worst debut for Sony Universal of Marvel characters behind February's Madam Web, as well as the franchise's lowest ever marks for critics and audience scores at a tragic 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, a C grade for cinema score. That kind of reception signals that, barring a holiday miracle, Kraven won't rebound over the rest of December. And yeah, like I said, I only heard a couple of things and none of them were positive. But yeah, looking at this, it is miles behind first and second place. Moana 2, it's probably going to be the best performing film of the holiday season, because honestly, like, look at your competition. Wicked, the fact that it's just still trudging along, like, look at that box office. The fact that it's only hit $500 million, like, it has no international appeal at all whatsoever. It might be a cat piss stinking box wine enthusiasts phenomenon, but outside of that very small demographic, it's a critical darling, but very little mainstream appeal outside of that. Moana 2, on the other hand, I mean, a repurposed Disney Plus show, and the fact that, yeah, it's very likely, if it's left in theaters long enough, 900, maybe $1 billion, especially with soft competition. I mean, Gladiator 2, the fact that thing is still making money, but it's going to be losing some theaters. And okay, 3,200 screens, 7.6 million with Sonic, Mufasa, and probably the only one that's going to be any good, and Nosferatu coming out on Christmas Day. Oh yeah, that 3,200 number, it's going to get significantly slashed. Expect them losing like 1,000 screens, because honestly, the fact that this thing is even turned, like, how much money has it made? I haven't been keeping track. Yeah, $400 million. That's a travesty. That's at least $400 million too much. But yo, coming in at 5, thank God. Okay, just War of the Rohirrim. It's crazy, right? Because EFAP put out their coverage for Gladiator 1, and it's like, God, it's been a long time since I've actually sat down and watched Gladiator, and ooh, some of those action scenes haven't really aged as well as I thought they had, but the performances are still top tier. I'm talking about the original Gladiator here. But anybody who even seen that when it first came out, like, there's no buzz around Gladiator 2. It's making money because it's the only thing that's in theaters right now. But I also, at the same time, was watching through the Lord of the Rings trilogy coverage over the weekend, and to compare and contrast that with anything that I hear about War of the Rohirrim, $4.5 million in 2,600 theaters, it's a wrap. Thank God, because it's just girl boss slop. Go figure, right? Philippa Boyens wanting to just go ahead and tell the story of the forgotten character that Tolkien just didn't want to do justice to. Didn't want to tell the tale about how Helm Hammerhand was actually inspired by his nameless daughter. Big shock. You take a story. You take one of the stories from the appendices, and instead of sticking it in the face of Amazon, then, oh, okay, cool, you want to go ahead and bastardize the appendices with Rings of Power? Okay, we'll show you how to do this better with one of the more famous stories from the appendices, taking that and doing it better with the people that made the Lord of the Rings. And I understand the books are like super popular and all that stuff. I don't want to downplay that, but actually made Lord of the Rings a household name for generations to come. Crafted the greatest cinematic trilogy of all time. Yeah, we can go ahead and do this better. And then they didn't. And oh yeah, this is supposed to be the soft introduction into a whole host of brand new Lord of the Rings stories. Yeah, I don't think so. After this abysmal turnout, who's excited for the hunt for Gollum? Who wants to see Viggo Mortensen's nearly 80-year-old ass reprise the role of Aragorn? Who wants to see Ian McKellen get... God, he's just about as old as Christopher Lee was when they filmed the Hobbit movies, but who wants to see him come back as Gandalf one more time? Yeah, I'm good. Just don't ruin it any further. If you want to make feminist interpretations about some of the most legendary stories of all time, you go ahead and tell your feminist stories without dragging anything else through the mud. But just imagine, right? Like how bad War of the Rohirrim wouldn't have done without the Lord of the Rings on the marquee. How bad? How much less than the $11 million that Kraven pulled in over the weekend would that not have, if not for the Marvel branding that was affixed to it? But because we had bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb for Sony's Spiderman-less a Spider-Man universe, it's over now. As Kraven hunts for an audience, Sony's Marvel universe takes final bow for now. The lights were on, but nobody came. At Brazil's prestigious Comic-Con experience on Sunday, Sony Pictures' surprise panel for Kraven the Hunter, the studio's latest non-Spider-Man Marvel movie, played to rows of empty seats, according to individuals in attendance. Yep, there were no stars and not that many fans, just silence in the superhero hype that should have been. A tale that you can equally transpose to the rest of the world, because that's what they were greeted to at Comic-Con, and that's also what they got at the box office. And now that more rumors are coming out about this catastrophic failure, the more we're figuring out some interesting stuff, because apparently, now take this with a grain of salt, Sony reportedly could have used Tom Holland's Spider-Man in its Spider-Man universe movies all along, but wanted to set up the villains, wanted to focus on the villains instead, wanted to go ahead and tell a Spider-Man universe story without the central character. A bold strategy, and guess what? It didn't pay off because, yeah, okay, Venom. Like, if you know anything about Spider-Man, it's like Venom's his guy. Like, for as much as the Sam Raimi trilogy made Doc Ock, made Green Goblin something, and then even with, the animated series that I grew up with at the time, it's like, yeah, Doc Ock is sweet, and so is the Green Goblin, and the Hobgoblin as well, which Harry eventually would have been if Sam Raimi would have got the fourth, I would imagine. But it's like, it's Venom, okay? Batman has the Joker, the X-Men have Magneto, Spider-Man has Venom. And those films did well. But at the end of the day, everybody's still looking forward to Venom squaring off against Spider-Man. As for the rest of the decisions that they're making out there with like Morbius and Madam Web, it's like that's all contingent on Spider-Man eventually showing up. And a Kraven movie is like, Kraven's best storyline is Kraven's last hunt, which involves him killing Spider-Man. It's like, how can you eventually tell the best Kraven story without Spider-Man there? No, we want to focus on the villains. God, Sony, you're So stupid. Looks like Sony's Spider-Man universe could have featured Marvel's live-action Spidey characters such as Tom Holland's Peter Parker, but the studio felt that audiences ultimately didn't want that. God damn it, Sony, you are as dumb as they get. Sony's Spider-Man spin-offs could have featured Holland's Spider-Man and more Spider people such as Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane, as Sony's deal with Disney never outlined that they couldn't, as found by Variety. This means that Sony's Venom franchise, Madam Web, Morbius, and Kraven the Hunter could have featured our favorite Spider-Man heroes, but the studio reportedly just didn't think audiences wanted that in a non-MCU project. I mean, you make an entire sub-franchise around one character and then not want to bring him into the fold. Make that one make sense. As we know, Sony decided to focus on Spidey's villains instead. And yeah, if you wanted to set up a Sinister Six, you're setting all of this stuff up for an eventual, guess what, Spider-Man to show up. It's like you're building up to something, and then what? Instead of having a big bad, like, you know, setting up all of your superhero characters for this face-off against a big bad, doing it, you know, Avengers and Thanos style. At the end of it, the big payoff, your Thanos level square off, is going to be bringing in Marvel's biggest hero? Like, what was the plan? Yes, after the success of the first Venom movie, which it was quite a financial success, by the way, the studio hadn't been deterred from this path since. Did get one cameo of sorts from Holland, yes, in Spider-Man 2 post-credits scene, and yeah, also, you know, you have Vulture just chilling over there in a dead universe right now, but don't think about that too much. Exhibitor relations analyst Jeff Bach told Variety, unfortunately for Sony, they had a taste of success with Venom, and that kind of spoiled everything for them because they thought they could just spin off all these characters to have. Oh, to not have Spider-Man in these films was a fatal flaw. Well, yeah, duh, that makes no sense in the world, but as we've heard from insiders as well, it's like Sony kind of hates superhero movies. They just like the fact that, you know, Spider-Man can print money for them, because even as bad, and you take a look at everything in totality, it's like Spider-Man 1 and 2 from Raimi, it's like those were tremendous, but they're also like 20 plus years old at this point in time. Spider-Man 3, like, people have soft spot for it, but it's like it's a jumbled mess. It's like really bad. And then the Amazing Spider-Man films, like, do we even need to mention those? Those suck. 7 Ways from Sunday. And then the Disney ones, it's like there's an argument to be made within sub-franchises of the MCU. It's probably the best trilogy, and Sony just simply licensed those films out, so at least under their banner, there's more bad Spider-Man content than there is good. That's just live action though, because yeah, it is pointed out, it's like, okay, at least on the animated front with the Spooderverse ones, Into the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse, what was the first one called? Something Miles Morales verse. Those were received extremely well. It was, you know, very eye-catching animation, and those right there are also reliable money printers. Is that because they're animated, or is it because it has Spider-Man on it? But you would also think, yeah, and given the fact that, well, we were already supposed to have Beyond the Spider-Verse, but it has been indefinitely delayed, and maybe it's getting to a point where this whole Spider-Man shit is just way too much of a burden for Sony, which is leading to rumors that Sony is considering selling the Spider-Man IP to Walt Disney, just finally getting one last big payout, and then washing their hands of the situation, trying to move off to the next big trend where, I don't know, maybe they're just going to try to milk their video game IPs for all they're worth. Who's anticipating and who's excited for a live action Horizon Zero Dawn movie? Yay. But anyways, let's talk about this here real quick. Rumor comes from Scooper, My Time to Shine. Hello, right? I hear Sony is seriously considering selling the Spider-Man IP back to Marvel. Okay, cool. That's it. That's all you have. They're considering it. Rumor comes as, yes, Sony's latest Marvel film, Kraven the Hunter, bombed at the box office, and then they're also saying, yeah, we're kind of done with this stuff for the time being. Madam Web did 15 million back in February, and everybody was laughing their balls off at that one, but who knew how bad it could ultimately get. There's also, yes, multiple conflicting reports about the state of Sony's Marvel Universe. First, Humberto Gonzalez of The Wrap, which is the article that we touched on briefly there, mostly because, well, the rest of it's paywalled, and you think I'm giving any money to The Wrap, you're out of your mind. Reported the universe was ending with Kraven. An alleged top talent agent informed him they've developed what they want to develop for now. It's really about the next Spider-Man film, which, yeah, we've had somewhat confirmed because the Shang-Chi director, Daniel Destin Cretton, he's going to be getting his hands on that. It's like, why? Congratulations, you are the shortest midget. Therefore, you get the opportunity to shepherd the biggest name under the Marvel umbrella. It's like, yeah, Shang-Chi wasn't the worst of, Phase 4, but then at the same time, was it such a big hit? Because it lost money at the end of the day. Was it such a big hit that you could go ahead and justify the decision to give them more work? And also a Spider-Man film on top of that? Silly. Gonzalez also reported that Sony Insider informed him that the studio is now focusing its efforts on Holland's highly anticipated fourth Spider-Man film, next installment in the acclaimed Spider-Verse animated film series with Beyond the Spider-Verse and Spider Noir television series featuring Nicolas Cage. Yeah, I haven't seen much about this, but it doesn't excite me. However, a few days later, Adam B. Vary at Variety claimed the universe was not dead. Oh good, we can actually still have hope for Madam Web 2, please. In fact, he bizarrely claimed that Sony never had a Sony Marvel universe, or that Sony Spider-Man universe. Oh, okay, so he's an asshole. He wrote, for one thing, technically speaking, actually, there was never really a Sony Marvel universe, okay, or a Sony Spider-Man universe, or any other official designation akin to Marvel Cinematic Universe in the newly relaunched DC universe. Yeah, sure thing, pal. Yeah, simply not true. Sony seemingly informed Deadline's Anita Bush back in 2017 that it was calling it, calling its universe Sony's Marvel Universe. And yeah, we've seen that marketing that was all over Madam Web back in the cut when we were talking about that. So you can go ahead and lie as much as you want, but at the end of the day, Spider-Man is still the biggest name that Marvel can pull out of the hat when it just comes to a standalone character. Okay, X-Men you could argue is bigger. The Avengers will eventually have to see once they define who exactly is an Avenger. Hopefully we'll get that figured out by the end of 2025. But as for Sony and what they're doing moving forward, outside of those already mentioned pieces where you got a couple of animated fare and one a Disney produced and a Sony licensed out Spider-Man 4 film, not a lot on the horizon, but they're going to be making any moves, or if Disney's in the mood for an acquisition, I guess we'll be hearing more about that in 2025, and a lot less about a Kraven sequel. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.